For today's video, we will be doing another room makeover, and the room we will be tackling this week is the guest bedroom. So we're gonna take this boring guest bedroom from something that looks like this into instead something that looks a lot more like this. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a quick look at what the room looked like before. The best part about doing a room makeover on a room that doesn't really have anything going on is you're not really undoing anything that's already been done to make it fit your style more. So it's the perfect kind of blank canvas. In order to get that really kind of organic, wabi-sabi kind of vibe in this space, I knew I needed to paint the walls, and I wanted to do kind of a faux lime wash technique. I have used the Portola lime wash paint previously, and it works great. Like, I can't say anything bad about it other than the fact that it is kind of expensive. So in order to keep the cost low for this room makeover, I decided that I was going to do a faux lime wash technique. And you can do this technique with any two colors you like, but basically you're gonna grab a color swatch, you're gonna pick two colors that are right next to each other, grab a gallon of paint of each of those two colors. Also make sure that when you're choosing your sheen, you're picking the most flat or most matte sheen possible to really get that kind of like lime wash, Roman clay effect. Take your block brush and dip it in both of those two colors at the same time, and then just simply make X's across your wall until the full wall is complete. I also painted the trim as well as the ceiling in the darker of the two colors, just to again really get that organic wabi-sabi feel for this bedroom space. So I already had the bed, the box spring, and the frame, but I did not have a headboard. So last week I asked you guys your opinion on what you thought I should do to this thrifted headboard. This guy was just $20, and the majority of you said go with the white linen, which I kind of felt was more the vibe for this space as well. And as I was looking at inspiration, whenever I do a mood board, I like to just do some dream shopping, and everything that kept coming up was kind of in this white linen fabric for the headboard, but it was just not in the budget. Even at Target, which was going to be a more affordable option, was still basically the budget of the whole room, but for just the headboard. So that's why I always go the thrifted route, because you can find great things. So I found also from the thrift store this $2 Target curtain panel, and we are just going to use this fabric to reupholster this headboard. So initially I had tried doing it with the fabric adhesive with the kind of blackout piece on the back of the curtain, and it just was not sticking to the actual linen fabric. It was just sticking to the blackout curtain fabric. So I decided to remove that completely and basically just start over. Once that back piece was removed, it then adhered perfectly to the headboard. I just took my fingers to kind of get in those nooks and crannies just to make sure everything was lining up really well and everything was nice and straight. If there was a wrinkle, this fabric adhesive does give you a little bit of time to work with it, which is nice. It doesn't immediately stick. So like here, I had a little wrinkle here, and you just have to keep working with the fabric until all of those wrinkles are kind of ironed out. I also added the fabric adhesive to all along the sides of the perimeter of the headboard, leaving enough excess so that way I could use my staple gun for the back. With the front now secured down, I just flipped the headboard around, and then I always, whenever I'm reupholstering anything, I like to start in a corner, and I just twist the fabric as tight as it can get and add my first staple there. Once the stapling was completed, I just removed any excess fabric, and then to attach it to the wall, I just did so using a pack of heavy-duty D-rings. And for right around the $35 price point, I think this is the perfect start to kind of grounding the bedroom space in a really beautiful and organic way. So for many months now, I've kept my eyes out at HomeGoods, I've kept my eyes out at the thrift store, but I had in my mind that I wanted to have these kind of plinth style marble side tables. But every marble plinth side table I saw was just not in my budget. So I decided we are going to go the DIY route. So you can of course use contact paper, but I wanted it to still feel like stone. And one way to do that is by using porcelain tile. So for tile for each side table, you'll need 4 12 by 24 inch tiles and then just one 12 by 12 inch tile for the top. I've seen people just connect the tiles together using just some strong, like heavy duty adhesive, but I know my family and we are rough on our stuff. So I wanted to make sure that it was really nice and secure. So I decided the first thing that we needed to do before we attach any tiles to each other is build a kind of like box frame inside of where we're going to connect the tiles. I'll pop up a screenshot here of the exact exact measurements that we used to create this kind of structure inside, so it is really nice and secure. But this is basically what we did in order to make sure that the tiles weren't just gonna kind of fall on top of each other. Once that structure was kind of completed together, I just used wood glue and my nail gun to put the pieces together that I needed to. Started off by just gluing the top down first, and then I worked on all of the sides. One thing that was nice about this project is I could kind of choose where the veining went on each plinth side table. And then once I was happy with the orientation of how it looked, I just placed each tile on and then took some clamps and I clamped those down until they were pretty well solidified. Once all of the tiles were connected, I then just grouted in between each tile with some white grout. And then for the very bottom, I wanted to add an additional 2 inches to this side table just to make it feel a little bit more like a nightstand. Sometimes side tables can be really short. So I took some extra wood that I had in my stash, created kind of a border around the bottom, stained it, and this was the end result. Another furniture item I knew I wanted to have in the space, which is because every inspiration picture that I loved had a really beautiful weathered primitive bench. And if you know anything about these benches, they can be super expensive. So I kept my eyes out for a really long time at antique malls, at antique stores, thrift stores. The only thing I really came across was this bench here. And this bench was $95, but I had some negotiation room because it had been sitting for a while. And the seller kept telling me the reason this piece was valuable was because of this vintage or antique meat grinder attached to it, which was something that I planned on removing anyhow. So the seller advised me to just remove that piece and sell it online if I really only want the bench. So once that piece was removed, it was time to do a little bit of sanding because obviously where that grinder was, the wood tone underneath of it was now a different wood tone from the rest of the bench. So that, plus there was a few water rings, so I just wanted to kind of unify, not totally sand it down because I still wanted some of that character pulling through, but I wanted kind of a cleaner slate than what it was. Then to kind of, again, bring it back into a more uniform color, I then just went in with some antiquing wax so that way all of the following color washing applications can all be at the same point. So the first color wash I needed to do was just to kind of remove all of the red tones as much as possible. So I always like to use this stain here. It is called Tinsmith Gray by Minwax. I'm also going to mix some water in there as well as a little bit of antiquing wax. To apply this color wash, I just did so using a foam brush. This is how it looked after one coat, and I could still see too much of the red poking through. Went in again with another coat, and I felt like we were getting somewhere closer to the color that I wanted, which was basically like a darkened or ashen brown color. So now that the red is a lot more neutralized, it's time now to deepen the overall color. So again, we're going to go in with another color wash. This one's much darker. We're going to primarily do antiquing wax, but I do like to add a little bit of black paint to it just to, again, deepen the overall color, and you get this perfect brown tone that works very well with my floors. And this is the easiest way I have found to really bring antique furniture that is stained in that orangey red tone and bring it into a more modern space. The next little furniture item I really wanted to have, because this is our guest room, I wanted to add a luggage rack. And these are weirdly expensive. So when I found this one, I know it's really beat up, but it was from the Goodwill bins and it was just a couple dollars. Started off by just removing any of the ribbon that was still there, and there was a few gashes taken out of it. So I just added some Bondo, sanded that down, and then wiped the whole thing down before just going in with first some black primer and then some black spray paint. I just bungeed the top so that way when I was doing all of my applications of paint, it was kind of upright in the way that it would be in the room. Once the paint had dried, I then took 3 of these belts that I found on the Goodwill retail side, started off by just removing those belt buckles and then also the seam at the end of the belt. Once those sections were removed, I then just folded the belt in half and then made one cut. So I had 6 pieces total of this fabric, but only ended up using 5. Starting off in the middle, taking the piece of fabric, adding some glue to the bottom side of this luggage rack. And then I wanted to flip it upside down just to make sure that that felt like a good width for it to open to. And then from that point, I just kind of worked my way out, adding additional pieces of fabric to either side of that middle piece, just kind of equally distancing them as best as possible. Once the glue was kind of secured down, I would still recommend either using a stronger glue or using the staple gun like I'm showing here, because I think you just want to make sure if a heavy suitcase is sitting on top of this, you don't want like all of the fabric to snap off. So I just wanted to make sure that it was really secure, stapled all of those pieces of fabric down, and this was the end result. Moving along now into lighting, which is such an important part of any room design. And one material that we really haven't used in this room makeover yet is a woven material. So you guys might remember when I found this huge laundry hamper at my local thrift shop for just $5 and decided to just take the lid from that hamper, turning that into our faux ceiling light fixture. So you can do this in any rental. You don't need to hardwire anything, but in order to make it look hardwired, you'll just want to grab a kit off of Amazon, and you'll just want to choose one that has some sort of a plate so it can be anchored into the ceiling. And then for the actual lighting, all you'll need to do is pick out some sort of USB chargeable, battery operated light with a remote, so that way it can actually function like a ceiling light would. I think this is a great way to make it look like it's hardwired, but it's totally not, and it draws your eyes up, it lets out light in such a beautiful way, but most importantly was so cost effective. Moving along now to some of the textiles I used in this space. So I desperately needed a set of curtains. So at the thrift store, they had a brand new basic set of curtains here that were of a pretty good height. They were 84 inches long. I would have preferred a little bit longer, but I felt like they were gonna work fine in this space, and they were super affordable. I loved how kind of sheer they were. They let light in a really beautiful way. And a lot of the curtains and all of the inspirations that I was looking at had these really light and airy, breathable curtains just like these. So I thought these were gonna be the perfect thing to use for this room makeover. Moving along now into some bedding options. So from the thrift store, you guys might remember when I found this Casaluna queen size comforter. Now, I did not find the matching shams, which was fine anyway, because after washing it, I'm just going to kind of use this as my insert for my hearth and hand cover. So you don't necessarily have to use a duvet insert, because that can oftentimes be really expensive. Just try checking your thrift store for the size that you need in a comforter that you like. Of course, wash it, but then use that as your insert, and that can be another way to save a little bit of money. The last textile piece I found at the thrift store was this Land's End kind of velvety plush blanket. Just decided to drape it over our DIY primitive bench, and I think it's just a nice mix of materials in this little vignette. Last but not least, for the actual room is all of the little decorative accessories. You guys might remember this little mini olive tree that I thrifted for just $4. This thing moves all throughout my space, but I think it's found a permanent home here on this dresser. Also, this thrifted incense bowl. I love this. I feel like it fits the space perfectly. Also found these really beautiful marble coasters recently. Again, just fits the color story perfectly in this room. With the bedroom side complete, now it's just time to take a look back on the closet that we made over into a office/vanity. This closet was just a closet that attracted junk. So I just really needed to go through these things and either donate or relocate these pieces so that way I could place a vanity or writing desk for me to kind of sit down and do some work, or also get ready for the day. And I really love these ones from Pottery Barn, but again, just a little over budget for what I need. So I ended up finding this one at the Hartville thrift shop for $46. But when I went to measure it, there was just one little problem. It was just a little bit too big, basically just like 1.5 inches off. So I decided the best thing to do was just to remove the molding from the sides, because you wouldn't be able to see that anyway. So I'm going to take my circular saw and just remove those moldings just on either side, leaving the front one just so it looks finished from the front, but the sides won't be visible because it's going to be kind of encased in the closet. With those moldings then removed, I just needed to remove the hardware just because it was pulling a bit too traditional for my personal liking. And then it was time for paint or stain. And I did contemplate just painting it black, but I really really loved the look of black stained furniture. The only problem was the kind of cherry tone was still pulling through with just the gel stain. So if this ever happens to you and you're trying to cancel out like a red undertone, you need to then use something that has a green undertone. So you can see on the left here, I went in over the gel stain with antiquing wax and just makes it a bit more neutralized. For the hardware, I needed something that was going to cover up where the old hardware was, so I went with cup pulls, and cup pulls are probably my least favorite handle to install because it can be a little bit tricky, so I like to use chalk so I can gauge where I'm going to need to pre-drill my hole for my screws to be inserted. After sealing the desk and adding our hardware, I then wanted to do some sort of a wall treatment inside of the closet just to make it feel a little bit more upscale. The only problem was there was already like a texture happening that I wasn't crazy about, so I had to sand the whole thing down, and then I wanted to add some grass cloth wallpaper. I did find this roll at the thrift store, but I knew it wasn't going to be enough to completely cover the closet, so I did order my grass cloth peel and stick wallpaper as well as this easy hang, which is just going to help it stick to the wall even better. Sometimes peel and stick wallpaper has a tendency to not be as sticky, especially since I had to sand the wall down. I wanted it to just be really sticking to the wall as best as possible. If you've never installed wallpaper, one thing I find helpful is just making sure to start at the top and then work down in a diagonal motion. So as a reminder, this is how this closet was looking before. I ended up removing the door just because I wanted it to feel a bit more opened, but this was so affordable to do. Besides the wallpaper, everything here is thrifted and I think looks so chic on a budget. And at the Hartville thrift shop, I came across this large scale textured vase for just $5 that was originally from Kirkland's. After giving it a good clean, I realized it was actually made of metal. So if I were to go in just with some chalk style spray paint, it would scratch pretty much immediately. So I like to go in with a self-etching primer first to kind of create a barrier between the metal and then the chalk paint. I chose to use this one in the color Shiplap by Magnolia Home, giving about 2 light coats, waiting about 15 minutes in between each coat before then going in with antiquing wax. Dabbing this antiquing wax on gives it that kind of antique or aged effect. You could also use gel stain here if you don't have antiquing wax or even dirt from outside. Now taking a clean paper towel and just wiping off the excess so you can really see all of that variation in texture. Because I had all of the other supplies on hand, this essentially really did only cost me $5, and I think I'm really able to achieve that high-end look on a budget. A new glassware item that I really loved from Pottery Barn were these Bedford-footed glass vases, and while I didn't find these in the vase section, I actually found them in the drinkware section. And to fill these, Pottery Barn has very high quality stems, but every now and then you can get lucky at your thrift shop and find also really good high quality stems. You just have to do a little bit of digging. So I found this berry foliage branch for just $1, as well as these rose branches for, again, just $1. Cut them down to the appropriate size. I know they're faux, but adding water just makes them look so much more realistic, and I think it looks super chic on a budget. Moving along now into lighting. So I knew that in this little makeover nook, I wanted to have some sort of sconce lighting, either one on either side of the mirror or one on top, almost acting like picture lighting. But if I found a sconce that I really liked, I was only finding just one of that exact same sconce. So when I came across this picture light for just $4, I thought that was a pretty fair price considering it had all of the pieces, the remote, the back plate, everything was included. I just didn't love the color for this specific space. So taking my frog tape, I'm just going to tape off the section where the light actually shines through. And first I'm gonna go in again, because it's metal, I'm gonna go in with that same self-etching primer just to make sure it doesn't get scratched up whenever I need to pull it down to charge it and then place it back up top. Once the primer had dried, I then went in with this high performance enamel spray paint in the color matte black, and this is the exact same combination I used for my bathroom fixtures, and it's worked out really well. All that was left to do now was remove the frog tape and install it, and I love how this picture light turned out. This was essentially, again, just $4 because I had the spray paints from previous projects, but I think I'm able to get that high-end look on a budget. Sourcing leather at the thrift store can be tricky. I pretty much never find it in the kind of fabric section of my thrift store, but one place you can find leather and imitation leather is in the coat section or the handbag section of your thrift store. Now for me personally, I don't have the heart to kind of cut up a vintage Harley Davidson genuine leather coat for a project. But I have absolutely no problem doing it if it's imitation leather from a fast fashion brand like Forever 21. So I ended up finding this maxi skirt, which was great because it gave me so much extra fabric that I can use on other projects. And it had a little bit of extra detail that I just tried to center on top of the stool. So I just centered those first with my staple gun, and then I just removed the excess fabric that I wouldn't be needing, so that way I could really get a nice clean finish on my corners. Projects like these are great because if you mess up, you can just simply remove that staple and then try again. All that was left to do now was just screw the two pieces together, and this is how the stool turned out. And that wraps it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments which hack or find or project was your favorite. With all that being said, I hope everybody has an amazing week, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye for now.